Hello everyone, this is Dr. Vishal Trivedi from Department of Biosciences and Bioengineering, IIT Guwahati. And what we were discussing about the living organisms. And in that context, in this particular module, we are discussing about the classification of the living organisms. And so far what we have discussed about the classifications of the animals, and in the previous lecture we discussed about the classification of the invertebrate animals, and in that we have discussed about the properties of the Porifera, Coelenterata. We have discussed about the properties of the Platyhelminthes and the Aschelminthes. Apart from that, we have also discussed about the some of the exclusive properties of the phylum Mollusca and Echinodermata. And then very briefly we discussed about the properties of the hemichordata. So far what we have discussed are the organisms which are actually been falling into the category of invertebrata, and we have discussed about the hemichordata, which is found to be a connecting link between the chordata and the non-chordata. So in today's lecture we are going to discuss about the chordata, and we are going to discuss the different subphylums and the divisions what are present in the phylum chordata. So let's start our discussion about the phylum chordata. So, as the name suggests, the chordata means the organisms which are actually going to have the notochord, right? So, the phylum chordata is actually the organisms which are actually going to have the cartilaginous notochord, at least in some phase of their life cycle. If they don't have the well developed notochord in the adults, at least they will going to show the some notochord in the early stage of the embryonic life cycle, and all those organisms are actually going to be present in the phylum chordata. Apart from that, the chordatas are actually going to have the gill slits in the pharyngeal region. So this pharyngeal region is the region which is required for the respirations. Then they are actually going to have the hollow dorsal nerves cord running throughout the body, right? So they are going to have the nerve cords which runs from the throughout the body, and that's how it actually going to regulate the activities within the whole body, or it is actually going to work as a sensory organs, so that it will be actually going to sense all the activities what are happening within the body. Then the animals which have the notochord but do not have the vertebral column are called as the invertebrate chordates. Okay. uh, these invertebrate chordates are the link between the non-chordata and the vertebrata. So within the chordata you have the different types of animals. One of the animal which actually going to have the vertebral columns are called as the vertebrata, whereas the animals which actually have a notochord but do not have the vertebral columns are called as the invertebrate chordates. And invertebrate chordates are supposed to be a connecting link between the non-chordata and the vertebrata. What is the difference between the chordata and the non-chordata? So we have listed out the some of the classical differences between the chordata and the non-chordata. So these are the list for the chordata, and these are the properties of the non-chordata. So in the chordata you are going to have the notochord which is present. In the case of non-chordata, notochord is completely absent. In the chordata, the central nervous system is dorsal and it is hollow and single, which means there will be a single dorsal nerves which are actually going to run throughout the animal. Whereas in the case of non-chordata, the central nervous system is ventral, solid and double, right? Then the pharynx performed by the gill slit. Pharynx are perforated by the gill slits, whereas the gill slits are completely absent in the case of non-chordata. The heart is ventral and the heart is dorsal. If it is present, it is going to be a dorsal. Whereas the tail is present in the case of the chordata, whereas the tail is not present in the case of non-chordata. So with this very few classical differences between the chordata and non-chordata, let's move on and discuss about the classification of the chordata. So the chordata is a very big phylum. The chordata is being further divided into the three subphylums. These are the Urochordata, Cephalochordata and the Vertebrata. Cephalochordata and the Urochordatas are considered to be protochordata, which means they are not going to have the well developed system. So let's first discuss about the subphylum Urochordata, and then we are going to discuss about the subphylum Cephalochordata. So subphylum Urochordata, these animals are called as tunicates. Okay, the body is covered by a covering called as test, which is made up of the cellulose called the tunicine. So this is, see, you have one of the tunicates where you have the cell body which is covered by the test, and it is made up of the cellulose which is called as tunicine. The notochord is present only in the tail of the larva. It is lost during the metamorphosis. So this is the class of example where the notochord is not present in the adult. It is only present very briefly in the tail of the larva, and it is lost during the metamorphosis, which means when the larva is developing into the adult, the tail is actually going to lose. These are the exclusively marine animals, so they are not found in the fresh water. The pharynx has many gill slits. So pharynx has many gill slits, right? You see here this is the pharynx where you have the slits, and these slits are being used for respirations. The examples are the Herdmannia, Salpa and Doliolum. So what you see here is one of the organisms from the subphylum Urochordata. Now let's move on to the another subphylum which is called as the Cephalochordata. So phylum Cephalochordata or subphylum Cephalochordata, these animals are called as the lancets. They are small fish-like animals that are no longer than 5 centimeter in length. So they are fish-like animals. You see the fish-like streaming body where you have the initial stroud and the last part you have a tail. They live partly buried in soft marine soils. Okay. The notochord is present throughout the life and extend in length. So notochord is present, right? This is the notochord. What you see, this pink color thing is notochord, and it is extended throughout the length of the organisms. They show the chordata characters such as the presence of pharyngeal gill slits, tail, and the dorsal nervous system. So what you see here is you have a very well developed tail, then you have the caudal fins, and then it has a dorsal fin, because these are animals like fish like animals. So and then they have the gill slits. Gill slits are present in the pharyngeal cavity or pharynx within the pharynx, and then it has a notochord which runs throughout the body. The examples are the branchiostoma or the lancelets. This is the structure of the bronchiostoma, where you have the different types of the part of the structures within, right? You have the well developed anus, you have the ventral fins, then you have the intestine, then you have the dorsal fins, nerve cords. So nerve cord is the dorsal, right, in the case of the branchiostoma. Now let's move on to the next subphylum. So the next subphylum is called as the subphylum Vertebrata, and the subphylum Vertebrata can be further divided because within the Vertebrata you have the very huge number of organisms. So subphylum Vertebrata can be divided into the two divisions. Okay, so this is the subphylum, right? Subphylum Vertebrata. Then subphylum can be divided into divisions. So you have the two divisions. One is called as the Agnatha, which is the organism which are not going to have the jaw. Then you have the Gnathostomata. Gnathostomatas are the organism which are going to have the jaw, and within the Gnathostomata you have the superclass. So superclass is, you have the two major superclass. The organism which are actually going to bear the fins, they are belonging to Pisces, and the organism which are actually going to bear the limbs, they are being present into the Tetrapoda. So in the case of vertebrata, why they are called as vertebrata? Because the notochord is replaced by the cartilaginous or bony vertebral column in the adult. Thus, all the vertebrates are chordata, but not all chordatas are vertebrata, which means if the notochord is replaced by the cartilaginous or bony ventral column into the adult, then they are being called as the vertebrata. This means all the vertebratas are chordata, but not the all chordatas are vertebrata. Besides the basic chordata characters, vertebrates have the ventral muscular heart with 2, 3 or 4 chambers. So you will see when we are going to discuss about the classifications that within the vertebrata you have the heart which can be 2 chambered, 3 chambered or 4 chambered. You have the well defined kidney for excretion and osmoregulations, and paired appendages which may be fin or the limbs, which means it is going to have the paired appendages for the movement, right? Either they are going to use that for swimming, which is actually they are going to be in the fins in the case of the fishes, or they are going to have the limbs which are actually going to be present in the tetrapoda. So let's discuss about the classification of the vertebrata. So we are going to start first with the division agnatha, which are the organism which does not contain the jaw. So subphylum vertebrata. Subphylum vertebrata, what are the different properties? The notochord is replaced by the vertebral column, that's why they are called as the vertebrata. And the subphylum vertebrata is divided into two divisions. One is division agnatha. It includes the most primitive vertebrates without the jaw. It has one class which is called as the cyclostomata, whereas the division Gnathostomata, it includes the vertebrates with the jaw, and it has the several classes which are grouped into two superclasses. Superclass 1 is called as species. These animals bear the fin for the swimming, whereas the superclass Tetrapoda, these animals have the four limbs for the locomotions. Now discuss about the division Agantha. So division Agantha, it includes the most primitive vertebrates without the jaw, and within that you have the class Cyclostomata. Cyclostomatas are jawless and eel-like animals. So skin is soft, smooth, containing unicellular muscular glands but no scales. Median fins are present but paired fins are absent. They are ectoparasite which have sucking and circular mouth without jaw. The endoskeleton is cartilaginous and the digestive system lacks the stomach. Intestine is present with a fold called as the ticklosole. So this is an example where you have the Petroroman. So this is the fish, right? Fish-like organism which do look like eel-like animals, right? So within the division Agantha, you have a class which is called as the Cyclostomata, where the respiration occurs by the 5 to 16 pairs of the gill slits. Heart is present and heart is two chambered. The gonads is single and large without the gonoducts, and fertilization is external. The examples are Petromozon, which is lamprey, and the Mexine, which is called as the hagfish. So this is what you see here. You have the structure of the organisms, and it is going to have the all other different parts of the body. You have the gallbladder, esophagus, heart, which is two chambered heart. Then you have the ear vesicles, gill slits. So these are the gill slits what are present in the organisms. Then you have the oral hood, oral tentacles, and so on. Now let's talk about the vertebrata. So we have discussed about the division Agantha. Then we are going to now talk about the Gnathostomata, where we have the two superclass. One is called as species, the other one is called as the Tetrapoda. So division Gnathostomata is superclass species. These are the aquatic animals. They are poikilothermic or the cold-blooded animals, which means they are body temperature changes with the surrounding temperatures. You can have the two different types of animals which are called as cold-blooded animal or the warm-blooded animal. So cold-blooded animal will not be able to maintain the body temperature. So they will actually going to, their body temperature is going to change as per the environment or the external temperature. Whereas the warm animals are actually going to maintain the temperature, and they are going to spend a lot of energy for that, right? Examples in this case is fishes and all other like fishes, the snake and the amphibians. Whereas in the warm blood animals you can have the mammals like the humans, right? uh, okay, they feed on the dendritous material, planktons, algae, mollusks, and the other aquatic animals. Locomotion is by the body scales and the fin. The caudal fin helps in steering. So you can see always there is a fish always has a caudal fin, and that helps in movement, right? It actually helps in deciding the directions. Then exoskeleton is made up of the dermal scales, and the endoskeleton is either bony or the cartilaginous. Superclass species, the body is streamlined and the boat shape, right? So this is, you see a typical fish, right, where the body is streamlined, so it actually can helps the fishes to swim very smoothly without actually experiencing a lot of frictions. The mouth is terminal and ventral in positions. The respiration is by the gills. So you will see that there is a gill slits, and that gill slit is actually going to filter the water, and during that process it is actually going to take up the water oxygen from which is dissolved in the water. Heart is two chambered and it shows the single circulation, which is the closed. So heart is two chambered, where you can have the one ventricle and one auricle, right? And it is actually a single circulation, which means it will not going to be a double circulation system. Which means the blood is going to come into the heart and then it goes from the heart, which means it's not like blood is going to be filled into the heart and then it is actually going to go. So it is actually a unidirectional single circulation system. The blood is red in color due to the red blood cells. The PCs have a well developed brain with a large olfactory lobes. The sexes are separate, and the most fishes are oviparous and some are viviparous. Then we move on to the superclass species. Within that we have the two subclasses. One is called as the chondrocytes and the other is called as the osteocytes. So the class chondrocytes, exoskeleton chondrocytes, or these are called as the cartilaginous fishes. So cartilage fishes. Other one is called as the bony fishes, right? So exoskeleton is made up of in the form of the cartilage. They are only marine. The exoskeleton is made up of the tiny pylacoid scales. The mouth is ventral and there are two dorsal veins. Uh, Male copulatory organ called claspers are present. The caudal fin is heterocercal or asymmetrical. 5 to 7 pairs of gill slits are present and operculum is absent. The fertilization is internal and these fishes are viviparous. Examples are all the fishes what you know which are present in the marine, right? The shark, electric ray, stingray, hammerhead shark, and the sawfish. So this is what you see here is actually a fish which is a cartilage fish, and mostly these cartilage fishes are present in marine, which means they are present in sea, and they are actually having the well developed system, right? So they have the two chambered heart, and the caudal fin what you see is asymmetrical, which means it's not like this, it's not like this, it's like a one side it is small, the other side is small, so it is actually asymmetrical. Then it has the dorsal fins, it has the ventral fins and the pectoral fins. These fins allow the fish to swim into the water, right? And caudal fin is actually being used to decide the direction. Then if you cut the fish, you will see that it has a huge amount of all the different types of the organs, right? It has the heart, then it has the digestive system. So what you see here is actually the alimentary canal, like this is the alimentary canal, what you see here, and that's end up into the anus. And then it also has the kidney, which is like this, right? And then it also has the forebrain. So brain is well developed in the case of the cartilage fishes. Then we have the another superclass which is called as the class osteocytes. These osteocytes are also called as bony fishes because the exoskeleton is made up of the bones. These are found in the fresh water and the marine fish water. The exoskeleton is made up of the cycloid or the ctenoid scales. So what you see here is actually, so you have seen, right, these scales are present onto the fish, right, which we actually draw like this, right. So these scales could be of two different types as per the design. It could be a cycloid scale, which is actually going to have a, this kind of structure, or it could be ctenoid scale, which is of this kind. So mouth is terminal in positions, right, and the single dorsal fin is present, which means the single dorsal fin, and you see it is symmetrical in shape, right. Then it has a claspers are absent. So mouth, so male sex organ, the claspers are absent in the case of the bony fishes. Then caudal fin is symmetrical, right? Caudal fin is symmetrical. Then it has 4 pairs of gill slits and are prevented covered by an operculum. So you have the gill slits, and the fertilization is external, and these fishes are oviparous. So you see the many examples of these fishes. You have the Bombay duck, pomfret, catla, seahorse, and all that. So what you see here is the many fishes like the mandarin fish, you have the seahorse, you have the angelfish, Labiorota, the rohu, like the main fish what we eat in our homes. And then we have the flying fishes, then we have the anabas or the climbing perches, and so on. And as far as the internal anatomy is concerned, they are also be very well developed. So you see that they have a well developed the digestive system, then they have the well developed sex organs, and this is the digestive system where you have the interior, you have the mouth, and then it enters into this is the stomach, and then it ends up into the anus. Then it has the urinary bladders and the other kinds of things. Now let's move on to the next class, and the next superclass is the tetrapoda. So tetrapodas are the animals which are actually going to have the 4 limbs, 4 limbs and the 2 hind limbs. Tetrapoda can be further divided into the many subclasses like the class like the amphibia, reptilia, aves, and the mammals. So within the Gnathostomata, you have the superclass Tetrapoda. These animals bears the 2 pairs of limb or the appendages. Animals like the snakes are limbless, and the superclass Tetrapoda include the 4 classes like the amphibia, reptilia, aves, and the mammals. So let's start first the discussion about the amphibia. So class amphibia are the organism which actually can stay on to the 2 places. It can be terrestrial, which means they can be stay onto the land, right? So they can be terrestrial or they can be aquatic, and that's why they are called as the amphibia. So these animals lives onto the land as well as the water. They are poikilothermic animals and they are carnivorous. The body is divided into the head, trunk, and the tail. So what you see here is actually this is the head, this is the trunk, and this is the tail. At the back side you have a tail. In some cases you are actually the tail is absent, right? Then you have the two pairs of limb which arises from the pelvic girdle, and there are two pairs of limbs which are actually arises from the pectoral girdle. So these are the forelimbs and these are the hind limbs. In frogs, the webs are present between the digits which helps to swim. So you have seen the frog, right? You have seen the frog. It has the webs like structure into the between the digits, and that actually helps the frog to swim into the water. The skin is moist, granular with the mucous membrane. So in the case of the frog, what you see here is the skin is very soft and it's slimy actually, and that helps in the frog in terms of getting the protection from the prey, and it is also helpful in terms of the frogs, the skin is not been getting damaged by the water also. They are having the prominent eardrums or the tympanic membranes are present in the head. The examples are frog, toad and salamanders. In the class Amphibia, the intestine and the digestive glands are well developed. So this is what you see here is the digestive glands, where you have the all the organs, like you have the liver, you have the esophagus, you have the stomach, and then you have the gallbladders, then you have the all other organs. So this is what the internal structure of the frog. What you see here is they have the well developed lungs for the respirations. Then they have the fat bodies. These fat bodies are actually being very good, because the frogs are going for the hibernations, and during that hibernation these fat bodies are being used for the for supplying the energy, because they can be utilized for metabolism, and that's how they can be utilized for the during the hibernations. Then they have the well developed heart, right? So circulatory system is of closed type and heart is three chambered and the ventral. RBCs are biconcave and they are nucleated. So actually the RBCs are nucleated, which means they are actually containing a nucleus. Remember that in all other organisms like the humans, the RBCs do not have the nucleus. Respiration is by skin, lungs and the buccopharynx, which means the skin is soft and the slimy, and because of that it actually helps the frogs to get the air from the or get the oxygen from the atmosphere. Apart from that, it has a well developed lungs and the buccopharynx. So it actually can take up it can do the respiration from the three sources. One, it can actually respire through the skins, then it can take up the oxygen through mouth, and then it also can take up the oxygen through the lungs. Nervous system is well developed. It has a well developed brain, and the other central nervous system. The sexes are separate. These are oviparous. The fertilization is external. This means they are actually going to give the eggs. Development occurs in water and it is indirect, which means there will be a metamorphosis. So what you see here is actually the life cycle of the frog, where the adult frog after the fertilization is actually going to give up the egg, and then these eggs are actually going to be fertilized with the sperm from the male frogs, and then that will develop into the embryo. That embryo will actually be developed into the tadpoles. These tadpoles then actually will stick to the plants within the pond or the water, and then they will eventually going to grow, and then they will develop, right? So initially they will be in baby tadpole, and then the tadpole is actually going to develop. So you see initially they are actually having the tail, and then as they will go through with the developmental process, the tail is actually going to regress and it's actually going to develop into the adult frog. This tail, whatever the material is present in the tail, is actually being used for a source of nutrition during the last phase of the metamorphosis, and that's how it is actually going to lose the tail. Now let's move on to the another subclass, which is called as the reptilia. So reptilias are the all the animals which are like snake and the crocodile and all the kind of things. So these are the crawling animals like the cobra, crocodiles and turtle, which means they crawl from one part to another part. They could be tetrapoda, which means they will going to have the well developed limbs, right? Or they could actually slide, okay, just like snakes. They are the first two terrestrial vertebrates. Few may be aquatic or the semi-aquatic found in the marshy land. So these are the first animals which were completely terrestrial. Compared to that, right, you might have seen that when we were talking about the amphibians, they were semi-terrestrial, like they can actually go into the water or they can be remain on the terrestrial. But these animals are true terrestrial because they were remain on to the land. And some of these reptilia animals are also found in the water as well. Most of these animals are carnivora, which means they are actually going to take up the nutrition from the other animals. Their locomotion is by the limb, which may have well developed pentadactyly digits and claws, which help the animal to creep or to the crawl. Reptiles are the poikilothermous, so this means they are also the cold-blooded animals. Skin is dry, non-granular and covered by the epidermal scales, scutes or the plates. So these are the some of the example what you see. This is the snake, this is the turtle, this is the this is the crocodile, and this is the lizard, right? The class Reptilia, the heart is incompletely four-chambered and ventral, and the circulatory system is of closed type. Only the crocodile has the exception that it has a four-chambered heart. So you see how the heart is actually being developed while the animals were going from the evolution. So in the fish you have the two-chambered heart, but these two-chambered hearts are continuous, which means the blood comes from one side and then it goes on to the other side. There is no circulations actually. Compared to that, the amphibians, so this is the two-chambered heart. Then compared to that, the amphibians, they have the three-chambered heart. And then in the reptilia, it has the three prime heart, which means it is actually having a three-chambered heart, but the one of the chamber is also partially been chambered. So it is partially four-chambered heart. Then that get converted into a four-chambered heart in the bird as well as the mammal. So mammal is also having the four-chambered heart. The eardrum is depressed, which means there is no eardrum. The respiration is through lungs. The brain is well developed. The olfactory lobes and cerebellums are better developed than the amphibians. Sexes are separate and show the prominent sexual dimorphisms. Fertilization is internal. Reptiles are oviparous. They lay eggs and show the parental care. So this is what it is showing here. So the adult snake is actually giving the eggs, and then these eggs are getting fertilized, and then these fertilized eggs are actually giving the baby snake, which are actually being developed into the adult snakes. Then we are talking about the class Aves. So it includes the flightless birds and as well as the flying bird, which means it includes the birds which could fly or which could not be able to fly. For example, the flightless bird, which means ostrich, and flying bird, like all the domestic birds what we see, right? Four limbs are modified into the wings for the flying. Hind limbs are used for walking or to the running. Aquatic birds have web-like toes. So this is what you see here, right? So aquatic birds have the web-like structure, right? Web-like membrane. This is present in the duck, right? And the body is differentiated into the head, neck, trunk and the tail. So what you see here is this is the head, then trunk, and then you have the neck here, right? And this is your tail, right? They are homeothermous, which means they are the warm bed animal, because the birds are actually going to maintain a constant temperature. The exoskeleton is made up of the feathers. So this is what is a typical bird, right? Where you have the beak, you have the neck, you have the trunk, and you have the back, and then you have the wings, right? The scales are present onto the hind limbs. Skin is thin, dry and non-granular. Bones are hollow. Jaw form the beak and teeth are absent. So they have the jaw but the teeth are absent. Special organs such as crop and gizzards are present. So crops and gizzards are actually the organ which are actually been helping in the digestive system. The blood is red due to the RBCs, which are biconvex and nucleated. Heart is ventral in position and it is four-chambered heart showing the double circulation. Respiration is by the lungs having the air sac for the buoyancy. So what you see here is a comparison between the bones, between the human bones and the bird's bone, right? And the human bones are actually solid, so they are not having air pockets, whereas in the bird's bones they are actually having the air pocket, and because of that the bird's bone are light, and because they are light they can be able to help in terms of giving the low weight, and because of that the birds can be able to fly. So brain is enlarged with the well developed cerebellum. Optic lobes are well developed, olfactory lobes are poorly developed. It's a unisexual cellular dimorphism, it's a oviparous and the internal fertilizations. Birds lay egg with the yolk and albumin. Birds are very good in terms of building the nest onto the tree or home also. You might have seen that there are birds are which are actually forming the different types of bird, right? Different types of birds are different types of nests. You might have seen the very beautiful nest from the many types of bird which we see in our homes, right? Most are the herbivorous and some are actually carnivorous. Parental care is well seen along with the seasonal migrations. You might have seen the migratory birds. In our campus anyway, we could see a lot of migratory birds which are coming from the other parts of the world, right, during the winter, right. Urinary bladder is absent and the females show only the presence of left ovary and oviduct to reduce the body weight during the flight. So what you see here is a life cycle of a typical bird. So this is the life cycle where adult chickens are actually going to give the egg. Then these eggs are actually going to be, these are the fertilized eggs, because as I said, the fertilization is internal, right? So this means the eggs what you get from the adult chicken are actually the fertilized eggs, and then these fertilized eggs are actually being be present outside, and then it is going to be incubated for some time at 37 degrees Celsius, and then the embryo is actually going to be hatched from the egg, and then this hatched egg chicken is actually going to develop into the well developed adult chickens. Now let's move on to the next class, and next class is called as the mammalia. See, these mammary glands are present for the nutrition of the young ones. So these are the unique class of animals which actually contains the the mammary glands for giving the nutrition to their young ones. Mammals are terrestrial, aquatic, aerial and arboreal, which means they are present. What is terrestrial? What they are present onto the land. Aquatic, which means they are present onto the water. Aerial, which means they are present in air, right? And arboreal, which means they are present onto the tree, which means the mammalian is a class of animals which are actually spreading in all other areas, right. They are present on lands, water, air and sea, and they are actually being most developed animals. So they are actually capturing these places with their skills. Most are herbivorous, few are carnivorous and some are omnivorous. So herbivora means they are actually eating the vegetables, carnivora which means they are eating the meat, and omnivora which means they are actually eating the vegetable as well as the meat. Human are omnivora, whereas lion is carnivora, and the some other like cows are herbivorous. Locomotion is by the limbs. Body is divided into the head, neck, trunk and tails. They are homeothermous, which means they are warm-blooded animals, right? They are warm-blooded animals. And exoskeleton is in the form of skin, hair, fur, nail and the hooves. So what you see here is a structure of the rabbit, and I'm sure you might have seen the rabbit, right? So it has a for head, then it has a trunk and all those kind of things, and it has a well developed tail also. Then the skin is granular, having the sweat gland and the sebaceous gland. Body cavity is divided into two parts. It has a thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity by a diaphragm. The mammals shows the presence of an external ears. Teeth are different types. You can have the incisors, you have the canines, you have the molars and you have the premolars. Heart is completely four chambered with a double circulations, which means from the two chamber it is actually going to receive the blood, and from the two chamber it is actually going to supply the heart, and that is called as the four chambered heart with a double circulations. RBCs are biconcave and they are without nucleus, except there is an exception that in the camel there is a nucleated RBCs. Blood is red in color and the respiration is by the lungs. So this is what you see here is a circulatory system, right? Then in the class mammals, the brain is highly developed. Cerebrum shows the transverse band called as the corpus callosum. The optic lobes are better developed and the olfactory lobes. Few mammals are oviparous, such as duck-billed platypus. So these are the primitive mammals. So that's why they are actually oviparous. Some mammals have the pouches for the development of young ones. These mammals are called as the marsupials. For example, the kangaroos, right? You know that you might have seen the kangaroos, that how they are actually protecting their young ones by keeping them into skin made pouches, right? The most mammals are placental and the oviparous. So far what we have discussed about the classifications of the animals. We have discussed, we have initially started with the very simple classifications, where we said that if the level of organization is cellular and the symmetry is mostly asymmetrical and the body cavity is acoelomate, then the phylum is going to be Porifera. So there are different criteria which we have discussed in the beginning, and based on those criteria the whole animal kingdom is being divided. And ultimately we have also discussed about the chordata, and within the chordata we have discussed about the subphylum Urochordata, subphylum Cephalochordata, and then we have discussed about the subphylum Vertebrata. And within the Vertebrata also we have discussed about the Agnatha, or the jaw, the animals which do not contain the jaw, or the Gnatostomata, the animals which are actually containing the jaw. And within that also we have the superclasses like DPCs or the Tetrapoda. And then we have also discussed about the different characteristic of the animals which are present within the Tetrapoda, whether it is the amphibians, reptilia, aves or the mammals. So with this I would like to conclude my lecture here. In our subsequent lecture we are again going to take the example of the plants and how we can be able to use that to explain you how the classification of the animal is actually how the classification of the organisms are actually being done. So with this I would like to conclude my lecture here. Thank you.